The Browns are making a quarterback change. Will it be enough to finally get their offense on track against the Vikings in London on Sunday?
It's going to take a lot more than that, I think.
We'll talk about it coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Locked On Browns fans and Locked On Vikings fans? Welcome on into our crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Vikings as we get you ready for Week 5 between these two teams on Sunday across the pond. Vikings already out there. Browns heading out. They headed out on Wednesday night, so they'll be joining the Vikings out there here shortly and getting ready for a big matchup here again between two teams that have some interesting storylines surrounding their quarterback situations right now, which I'm looking forward to talking about. We'll also break down some key matchups in this game and, of course, lay out the path to victory if we can find one for the Cleveland Browns. We'll talk about it. All that's coming your way on this Crossover Thursday, which is presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So, obviously, on my front, Luke, The big conversation, of course, starts with the fact that the Browns on Wednesday officially announced their decision to pivot to Dylan Gabriel as their starting quarterback and bench Joe Flacco. I think it's an interesting one. I honestly thought that the Browns are going to wait maybe one more week because this is the London game and it's kind of like a different schedule and things kind of changing with a rookie quarterback in there.
Weird time to do that. Yeah.
I just because it's a rookie. If it was like a veteran, I don't think it would matter as much. But I kind of was. I don't want to say shocked because listen, this offense has been rock bottom, and if you can at least put a different quarterback out there and maybe breathe some life into it to a degree, I understand the decision from that standpoint. We'll see if it pays off on Sunday. There's this Vikings team is obviously really good defensively, but there's some questions on offense that I know we'll get into. But obviously, a different challenge for them as they get ready to face Dylan Gabriel versus a 40-year-old Joe Flacco, who we've seen the first 4 weeks, just isn't mobile and very much looks his age.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions for you about this. So here's the thing with me. This is a buck wild time to do this. Because of all of the defensive coordinators in the whole league, Brian Flores is like the last guy you want your young quarterback going against.
Yeah.
He has proven to not be this unbeatable entity, right? We just saw last week, Aaron Rodgers, the Steelers, they were able to move the ball pretty methodically, pretty consistently. And then you look at a guy like Jake Browning and you're able to generate 5 turnovers and have this crazy game and buoy your EPA per play so you look like the best defense in the league. But against young quarterbacks, this goes all the way back to 2023, Brian Flores has been statistically like their worst nightmare. And the Browns have a bye coming up after because of London, right? Like, wouldn't that be such?
They don't.
Oh no,
that's what made this. That's what made the decision even more, I think, perplexing from a Browns standpoint. Was next week they come home, they play the Steelers, who actually are coming. The Steelers had a bye week or have a bye week this week, so they're playing the Steelers, who are coming off of a bye week in Pittsburgh, which is a place that the Browns have not won during the
game after London.
Yes.
Oh,
they are playing
Lord.
at Pittsburgh, which is a place where they have not won in the regular season in years. Their last win came in the playoffs in 2020, but they haven't won there since like the early 2000s. And so when this Browns schedule came out, the initial thought process was they're going to try to get through these first 6 games, and then they're going to make a change at quarterback, because the first 6 games were Bengals, Ravens, Packers. Last week it was Detroit, then the Vikings, then the Steelers, and that it was a tough stretch. Everybody understood that. So the initial dates of people sort of circled was like, all right, week 7 against the Miami Dolphins at home is the perfect time to make a quarterback change, but that's not happening. They're doing it now. So I'm with you on like the team being urgency. Sort of weird, but I also think that this speaks to just how desperate Kevin Stefanski is to get this offense looking at least somewhat differently, or trying to find some sort of spark with this group right now and maybe salvage the season, or at least make it look like they're trying to salvage the season. It's an interesting time though, for sure.
Yeah, that feels to me like there's pressure. And I know that that's like, there's a history of that in Cleveland. But there's pressure on Stefanski you got to turn this around now, or you're not going to make it to week 7, maybe. And I mean, he's been there for a while and they haven't accomplished much, so it kind of makes sense to me. But basically what you're going to see, and you'll have to tell me about what you expect from Dylan Gabriel, because what I think you're going to see guys on the line of scrimmage all day long with no real way to determine who's coming, who's going. They have this year used a lot more, tried to do stuff at the cadence to try to muddy the picture rather than having just everybody at the line of scrimmage. You have somebody back, creeps up, somebody who's up, who drops back, and trying to like time that out at the line of scrimmage to go from one look to another look to another look. I doubt they're going to do that against a young quarterback. That's a way to try to fool a veteran. But against a young quarterback in his first start, it kind of feels like that's just going to be, let's just put everybody on the line of scrimmage and force him to process it all quickly and see if you can't like induce those mistakes. I know you haven't seen much of Dylan Gabriel outside of the preseason, which you have to take with a grain of salt, but how do you think he'll do against a very blitz heavy and a very blitz look heavy, which is a distinct thing, game plan?
Yeah, listen, I this is the way I view this. Like, I think it makes sense that they want to get a different quarterback in there and try something different. I think especially from a standpoint of like the mobility part of this, right? Like you have Joe Flacco, who has been a statue back in the pocket, cannot move whatsoever. And Kevin Stefanski, going back to his early days here in Cleveland when he had Baker Mayfield as the quarterback, part of his offense consisted of a lot of rollouts and sort of those level concept plays downfield. He hasn't been able to do those with Joe Flacco. You can do some of that stuff with Dylan Gabriel. So I think the idea here is with Dylan Gabriel, sure, the offense might not be completely fixed, but I think they're trying to be able to, open up the playbook a little bit more, be able to do some things just with I'm not saying he's a mobile quarterback, but with the ability of him to at least move in the pocket a little better, I think they expect they can do a little bit more, or he can maybe escape pressure at times. That's what I think they're hoping for. But I still say, and you alluded to this even in the intro, that it might take more than just a quarterback change to fix this offense. That's 100% true. This offensive line is
the Vikings. When I said that, I was saying they got bigger problems. We'll get to it.
No, so for the Browns though, their offense has been a disaster beyond just the quarterback position. Their tackles have been hurt. So both the guys they've had filling in, KT Levinston and Cornelius Lucas have been like turnstiles at times. They did not do well against Aiden Hutchinson last week. So that hasn't gone well. Like this offensive line is the biggest issue, I think. There's been a lot of drop passes from receivers. So I think Gabriel is like the one thing Stefanski can change right now in season to maybe breathe some life into this offense. I think the other things, though, like the other problems, they traded for Cam Robinson this week. I'm assuming they're going to probably try to start him at one of the tackle spots, probably left tackle.
We're familiar with that guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of moving parts here, but I think they're sort of in this mode of we got to try to fix this thing as quickly as possible on the fly. And that's why the decision was made. But whether or not it pays off remains to be seen. But I do think they see value in finding or having a different quarterback in there who can maybe do a little bit of something different than what Flacco's giving you to this point. I'm curious from your standpoint, because the quarterback conversation also sort of extends to the Vikings here a little bit, because we know J.J. McCarthy's been dealing with an injury. I know Kevin O'Connell provided an update on him, but it is looking like right now it's going to be Carson Wentz who's under center. But what is the latest on J.J. McCarthy? And I guess what are your expectations for Carson Wentz, who's still sort of manning this offense for at least another week?
Yeah, so I'm in the UK with the Vikings, so I haven't been super able to as of this recording, I have not yet seen the Wednesday injury report, but O'Connell said that J.J. McCarthy, they hope he returns to practice this week. He had said earlier, a week or two ago, when the injury first happened, they're not going to put him in the second he's cleared to practice. They want him to have a full week of practice, and he actually cited week 2. If you watch Sunday Night Football, J.J. McCarthy didn't look so good. And part of the reason that I guess they're claiming for that is that he missed a day of practice that week because his wife was having a kid, or his fiance was having a kid. So he missed practice for the birth of his son. And not having that practice, he kind of O'Connell felt as though that messed with his ability to get a game plan down. It's his second game ever, by the way, and he's 22 years old. So they don't want to put him in that position again. So if he practices on Wednesday, which listeners, you'll already know about this, then that is a pretty good sign for him playing. If not, if he is like a limited participant on Friday, don't expect him to go in just because he's getting that much healthier. It'll still probably be Carson Wentz. Although Carson Wentz kind of stunk up the joint in Dublin, and that might also put a little bit of pressure on O'Connell to maybe push things a little bit more, even though he's been pretty committed in not doing that. The game that Carson Wentz had is a little bit like, oh man, like how bad can it, like how close can we get before we start getting intoxicated by the idea of not putting up with that again?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation for sure. And especially with a young quarterback, there's probably no sense in rushing him back. I also wonder how much the Vikings are looking at this game and understand, the Browns defense is really good, but because their offense is so bad, and maybe, who knows, maybe Dylan Gabriel can help really make it at least an average NFL offense, and it changes things. I'm not necessarily predicting that, but like maybe it won't take, even with Carson Wentz, the Vikings found a way to score 20 points in that game. Like maybe it's going to take, maybe they can go into this one realizing like, hey, even with a limited offense under Wentz, it's the Browns, right? Like they're winning games when they do win by like 13 points. So maybe that maybe plays.
I want to ask you everything I can about the defense.
Okay. Well, I think we have plenty to talk about then, because we'll get to some key matchups coming up next, including a very dominant Browns defensive line against a banged up Vikings offensive line. I think that's where the conversation has to go next. We'll talk about it coming up on a crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Vikings. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. There's nothing better than following the NFL season with FanDuel, and frankly, the best part is they have options for however you like to bet. Maybe you're a prop bet person and you want to bet on a player eclipsing a certain benchmark, or maybe you want to combine that player's benchmark with a few other props or even a money line to build a same-game parlay, or you can just jump on the money line in real time as the action unfolds. The options are endless, and that's what makes every game, whether your team is playing or not, more exciting when you're playing along with FanDuel. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. This episode is also brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. They make cars that keep you and your family protected. From footwork to breathe work, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. Plus, all-wheel drive is standard in every crossover SUV, so you can drive with confidence through almost any season, which is great if you live in Cleveland, because this time of year, you can get all 4 seasons in a single day. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, so quarterbacks dominated the conversation in segment 1, but we have to talk about the guys in front of the quarterbacks for this next portion of the show, because we're talking about some key matchups here. And I do think, Luke, that this game ultimately comes down to what's going to happen in the trenches. The Browns defensive line, headlined by Myles Garrett, is easily one of, if not the best in football. The Vikings, meanwhile, dealing with a ton of injuries up front on their offensive line. Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly, Brian O'Neill, who got a positive update on his injury but isn't expected to play this week. To me, this is where the game is going to be won and lost. And I actually think if I'm going to pick the Browns here, which we'll get to our picks coming up in the final segment, that is the area that I'm looking at where I feel like there's some confidence in. This Browns defensive line could just completely disrupt this game and flip it in favor of the Browns. And maybe Myles Garrett, this is one of those games, like Myles Garrett's done this throughout his career, where Myles could just completely take over and win the game for the Browns. He did that a couple years ago in Indianapolis. That's the sense I kind of get coming into this game because of the injuries that the Vikings are dealing with up front.
It's worse than you even know, Spencer. Um, so Ryan Kelly has experienced his 5th concussion and his second in as many weeks, or his second in I think 3 weeks. So that's like a deeply concerning situation.
Yeah.
They have a second-year player behind him, Michael Juergens. He had a decent game against the Bengals when he came in relief of Ryan Kelly, but against the Steelers it was pretty rough. He had Donovan Jackson got wrist surgery. He's not expected back until after the bye. They have Blake Brandel there, who was the Vikings starter last year. A bit maligned as a starter, but you'll hear it. We're getting real rough. You have Justin School at right tackle instead of Brian O'Neill. He has been an absolute abject catastrophe. He has been at times single-handedly holding the offense hostage, and it's kind of insane that the Vikings haven't tried other players yet. And then you have Christian Darrisaw and Will Fries, who are both coming off of significant leg injuries from last year, who are both healthy now, but that's still a thing to monitor. And now Michael Juergens, non-participant in practice on Wednesday with a leg wrap. So they move Brandel to center, where he has never played, and they have an undrafted rookie from Wisconsin in Joe Huber at left guard. That is the situation we are dealing with. So you have 2 incredibly unproven players on the inside. And you have this Justin School problem. So you have to tell me if the Browns do sides with Myles Garrett or if they hunt matchups more. But if you're hunting matchups, Myles Garrett over the right tackle all day long and just let him cook. The Vikings are basically going to have to dedicate at least a chip every play, if not extra doubles, extra tight ends, running backs. Like you might have to dedicate 2 skill players a play over there, just triple team him every single time. And then you leave those other guys on an island against like Mason Graham, who's been having a pretty good season, if I understand right. So like, it's a rock and a hard place. It is truly pick your poison with this Vikings O-line. I am so deeply concerned about what the pressure situation is going to be. And I just did a whole show yesterday's Locked On Vikings is kind of about this. Is like, so what do you do? Do you just decide, okay, we're going to use 8 blockers all game long because it's the only way we can do this, and just hope you can get open with 2 downfield? Or do you just become Oregon and try to throw every pass in 2 seconds? Well, whether it's JJ McCarthy or Carson Wentz, those guys don't want to do that, and Kevin O'Connell really never wants to give up on hunting explosives. So I kind of think this is going to be 8 men in protection and Godspeed, and hope you can like run the ball away from Myles Garrett and have some success that way somehow. But yeah, it is rough up front. And if we even get a little bit of good news over the week, it'll be like, well, we're using our backup center instead of a guy that's never played center, and the backup center ain't that good anyways.
Yeah, listen, like as bad as the Browns offensive line has been, and going back and watching the Vikings game from Ireland and you know, reading about what's going on with the offensive line and the injuries that, as you so eloquently laid out, Luke, I've kind of been joking with 2 Browns fans about the idea that like the Viking situation is probably worse than the Browns, and you certainly gave credence. Yeah, you certainly gave credence to that. And listen, anytime Myles
at this moment, the starting 5 is really exciting. We have not yet seen the starting 5 altogether, and I do not believe that we will this season.
You know, it's funny too, you mentioned this, because as I was watching the Browns game over the weekend, I was watching some of these other games over the weekend, like the Chargers losing to the Giants, for example. You know, I'm struck by how bad offensive line play sometimes is in this league. Like when it's crazy how like 1 or 2 starters can go down, and there's just not a lot of options for teams in terms of depth to like fix those spots. Like one offensive lineman injury could honestly like sabotage a team's season, because it's like the difference between the top tier guys and the guys after that is just so vast in this league. But regardless, listen, anytime Myles Garrett is part of a game plan, he's always going to be the focal point of any team's offense trying to take away. And you can chip him even when you're at full strength. You can chip him, and he's still gonna make his plays because he's Myles Garrett. But with this offensive line, like this, there's absolutely an opportunity where like the Vikings can throw anything they want at him. It might not matter, because even if you throw 3 guys at him, Mason Graham can cause some problems. The rotation of Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire at the opposite defensive end spot has been really solid for the Browns so far. Even Malik Collins has been like one of the top defensive linemen that hasn't drawn a lot of double teams. And he's like one of the top defensive linemen in terms of like not getting double teamed, and winning his one-on-ones. Like, he is constantly generating pressure from the interior. So yeah, I listen, as I said, if there is a path forward to the Browns winning, it starts with that defensive line just absolutely feasting against a really influx Vikings offensive line. And you talked about Carson Wentz playing poorly. If they can get to him as much as I think they can, he could make some mistakes. Defense could get some turnovers. You give this offense that has obviously struggled this year a short field, make their lives a little bit easier. I think that changes the game completely on its head. So that to me is like the key in this game if the Browns are going to be able to pull this thing off going to London.
So let's take this to the next step, because I think this is the case on both sides of the ball. It's going to be a lot of pressure on a quarterback who can handle that pressure. Like, you can't walk into this game as the Vikings and not just assume, okay, we're going to be under 40 or more % pressure. 4 is probably conservative. Like, it's bleak. So, okay, how do you deal with that, right? And I think the Browns are asking the same question. We don't know how they're going to deal with that with Dylan Gabriel. Is the expectation he's just going to kind of run around and make plays when he's being chased? Is the expectation he's going to get rid of the ball? I would be curious to know if you have any inkling on that. But, like, it's going to come down to who can be under pressure, move the offense, and protect the ball. There's a stat that goes around basically after every Vikings game about Kevin O'Connell's record when he wins or loses the turnover battle, or wins or ties and then loses the turnover battle. And the turnover battle predicts the outcome of the game like 4 out of 5 times. If you can win the turnover battle, it's really difficult to, and I'm sure that that's not that far off of like the league-wide stat. I don't have it in front of me. But, I mean, look, you win the turnover battle, you win the game more often than not, right? And this is a turnover-prone offense in Minnesota. The Browns have also had their fair share of mistakes, and you're going to have a ton of pressure on a young quarterback. I think it comes down to that, which could mean it comes down to fumble luck, right? Where does the ball bounce? It could come down to where that tipped interception is. It could come down to, whether or not everybody's DBs can catch, which isn't necessarily the most reliable thing famously in the league. It's going to be a really messy game. I'm sorry to anybody that gets up, at 8:30 in the morning to watch this one, expecting it to be some kind of barn burner, because I do think this is going to be a lot of field position, a lot of punts, and ultimately come down to who spots who a short field off a turnover.
Yeah, listen, I think you're spot on with this for both these teams, like what the sort of key is. We know, like you said, Brian Flores loves to bring the blitz. It's a rookie quarterback who's going to be facing that for the first time, and the Browns offensive line has its fair share of problems. And this is why I think Kevin Stefanski getting Gabriel comfortable early and trying some of those bootleg type plays and getting him out of the pocket, being able to move that pocket, I think is going to be critical for the Browns and specifically Dylan Gabriel in this game. On top of the fact that, listen, the run game has been maybe the one bright spot to this point. Quinshon Judkins has been pretty solid. And so getting him the football and trying to make some plays on that front, I think is going to be a key in this game as well. We'll talk about that some more in depth. We'll give you some predictions for the game coming up as well as we lay out the path to victory for both teams. That's what's coming up next in this crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Vikings. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is back in full swing, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and price jumps at checkout, it's frustrating. That's why I use Gametime, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime has become my go-to app for buying tickets. I kid you not, just last year, I was buying tickets for my wife and I to go see Ohio State, Michigan. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Gametime, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. You can too. I'm talking about tickets to your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go to Gametime today. Final segment here of our crossover edition of Locked On Browns and Locked On Vikings. Spencer German, Luke Braun, and this is usually the portion of the show where we start diving a little bit more into just the path to victory for both these teams. And obviously it's an interesting one. I already kind of laid it out, but I do think that is going to be their strength for their team, which is obviously the defensive line, and how dominant they can be, how much pressure they can create on Carson Wentz, what types of problems they can cause this Vikings offense with the banged up line that they'll go in front of. This honestly does feel like a game where Myles Garrett or just that front in general could take over, gift the Browns offense some easy and short fields. But it's also not like lost on me that with the offense has been rock bottom with Joe Flacco. That's undeniable. Do I think it's going to be a little bit better with Dylan Gabriel? Yes, I think that that's very, very possible. But am I sitting here predicting that they're going to go out and put up a bunch of points? They haven't scored 20 points since week 13 of last season. Like, I still don't know if that's even in the cards because this offense has just been so bad in so many different areas. But again, I think for me, it starts like the path to victory for the Browns certainly starts with that defensive side of the ball. And we haven't even really talked about like on the outside of things. We know that the Vikings bread and butter is the fact that they have one of the best receivers in football in Justin Jefferson, a guy that can take a top off a defense and make some plays. The biggest question becomes, can they get him the football consistently with the pressure that the Browns could be generating, and obviously with a lockdown corner on this team as well, and Denzel Ward.
Right, and that's another matchup that we definitely should talk about. So the Vikings have this receiver core of a ton of speed, but they're all kind of smaller. They don't play a physical brand, right? They're all go around you guys, not go through you guys. And Jefferson's one of the best in the league, one of the best I've ever seen at going around, not through. He has there's this incredible detail, this precision to the way that he runs a route, and the way that he sets up his deception. He's not just trying to make you think he's going right and then he goes left. He's trying to make you think it's going right because he knows your film study says that from this formation, from this, if I go right, then it's going to be this concept probably. And he's giving you a much more sophisticated picture, which can really punish like veteran defensive backs that think they know what the picture looks like. The problem is if you knock him off of that timing, there's no more of that tool. So teams have loved to like put a safety over the top and then press him, or just play catch technique and try to jam him off the route tree, especially when they have a bigger, more physical corner, like the way I think of Denzel Ward. So that's another potential snag in the Vikings offense trying to move the ball. They also have Jordan Addison, who's really fast but small. They have Jalen Naylor, who's really fast. He gets knocked off his route really bad. So they got these guys that can take the top off the defense, but how are you getting the ball to them when you've got this D-line, O-line matchup nightmare thing happening in front? And a quarterback that might not even see it in Carson Wentz, probably, but you don't feel too much better about that with J.J. McCarthy in his third start coming off an injury with a hobbled ankle. So, yeah, this whole game just feels like, okay, which offense can find a way? Which offense can find a way to survive? Because these guys, it doesn't feel like you're going to see 80-yard drive back and forth, 80-yard drive back and forth. There's just too many problems. One offense will figure it out, or one offense will fail so spectacularly that they gift it to the other one with a short field. At FanDuel right now, at least as of this recording, the line is at 3.5. favoring the Vikings. The over-under's at 35.5, which is one of the lower ones I have seen in some time.
That's
and
a really
it still
low
feels
number.
high.
Yeah, it's a really low number. But it also speaks to, I think, the state of these teams right now, interestingly enough. And I love that you break down like the wide receivers there. I think that is an area, by the way, like if Carson Wentz can find time in the pocket, if they can make plays. I know Justin Jefferson also primarily an outside receiver. I think he lines up outside like 80% of the time. I think it's something crazy like that.
It's hard to make that because there's like two-man stacks and like who's the quote unquote outside guy doesn't matter. But it's funny you say that because coming out of the draft, everybody saw him as a slot only because he only played the slot at LSU. Can very comfortably play all positions and every receiver on the Vikings does. They all move.
Well, and I think that's important because the one part of this Browns defense that I think is a weakness is the depth in the secondary, and their slot corner spot has not been very consistent at times. It was Cameron Mitchell for a little while. He was just released yesterday because he just wasn't performing. They've had Miles Harden there more lately. They also they tend to put some safeties there at times. So that's kind of like the one spot that you can attack. So whoever they're sort of utilizing in the slot, I think there's an advantage there, especially with it being a great receiving core. And also Denzel Ward doesn't usually shadow somebody all over the field. They kind of trust whoever's in a certain spot to just guard whoever's in front of them. So that's another key thing to keep in mind is like he'll be on his side of the field and he'll be messed up with Justin Jefferson a lot, I'm sure. But there's going to be times where like he goes the other side.
I think they might throw wide receiver 3 out there and just say, go chew on him, Denzel Ward, and go try to find opportunities elsewhere.
And then on the opposite side, it's going to be up to Greg Newsome, who's actually played really, really well to start this season on the opposite side as an outside corner, opposite of Denzel Ward. And I think like that's, not that he's had inconsistencies throughout his career. I think this year he's playing really well, but certainly that'll be a challenge for him if he's lined up with Justin Jefferson a lot.
Yeah, when are you trading Greg Newsome to the Vikings? I've been asking for this for like 3 years.
When are we trading with the Vikings?
What's the draft pick? What do you need?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, he's been in trade rumors for a couple of years, but we'll see. He's playing for a contract right now, so could be an opportunity at some point down.
Yeah, maybe it's a deadline move, right? Brown season goes belly up. Maybe we're sitting at 500.
I don't know if they have enough corner depth to make that move, but yeah. So another fun matchup for sure is going to be that Vikings receiving core against the Browns secondary. And yeah, I think you're right. Like whichever offense kind of finds a way here, I think is who sort of comes out victorious. But I think the number being 35 speaks to the state of these two teams right now. Let's before we get out of here, a prediction from both of us on how we think this game goes, who comes out on top. We haven't even talked about the fact that like the Vikings have already been over there, like because they were in Ireland and now they just go to London.
That's probably why they're favored.
I wonder.
I'm looking at what the Browns did against the Packers, which is just unequivocally a better offense than what the Vikings have done by a lot. And the Browns managed to stymie that, and they managed to. That Ravens game is a tough sell because it did end up being really bad, but there was a lot of spotted turnovers and short fields and stuff. And I kind of felt like for a good portion of that game, the Browns held up well until they just kind of ran out of gas and it got away from them after that defense kind of got hung out to dry. I don't know, maybe you disagree, but I look at this Browns defense and I see like that's a very good unit. And the Vikings defense is a very good unit. And it comes down to that. But for the Vikings to be favored by more than a field goal, the only reason I can think of that is either people just think Dylan Gabriel is that much worse than Carson Wentz, which is kind of tough for me to buy. Like we all saw Wentz. It was an island game. Everyone saw Wentz. I cannot believe in any way that he is getting like credit from the public. And then the rest advantage. So the Vikings have been in Ireland. I think they were a little jet lagged in the Steelers game. Their heads weren't really in it. And they were making a lot of mental mistakes, both pre and post snap. So I kind of do believe that their little sleep science thing backfired on them. And they flew in on a Thursday. Well, if the Browns are there and now the Vikings have been there for a week, that could be a pretty big difference. And it does seem like that is driving the Vikings to be favored by more than I think would be appropriate at all on even a neutral field, let alone a Browns home game.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. And that could be the thing that sort of is swaying the line in their favor. Because like these teams put so much time into figuring out like what's the right time to fly out there. How do you sort of handle the jet lag? And we'll see if the Browns have the right method here, leaving Wednesday night to get there Thursday and then and all that. I've talked to a few people who said like when they've made this trip before, usually by Sunday you sort of felt like you were ready or you were kind of acclimated. But I think you're right. Like on the football field, sometimes it plays out where there's the mental mistakes. There's like a lull or malaise to the team. So we'll see how it turns out for the Browns. But I do wonder how that's impacted the line here. I'll let you have the floor first here, Luke. What is your final prediction for Browns and Vikings on Sunday?
So I hate doing score predictions. I haven't done it for a long time. Browns fans have heard me come on and a crossover and say I'm not doing a score prediction. You're saying arbitrary numbers, doesn't matter. But here's what I will say. I don't think either fan base walks away happy. Somebody's going to win but feel like it was ugly, and then another team is going to lose and be really, really mad. I don't think any fans are going to walk away like feeling great about it.
You don't know Browns fans. They feel like they felt good after the Packers win because they were just like, we don't know how many of these we're going to get this year, so we'll take it. So I think Browns fans would feel the same way.
There was nothing ugly about that. That was sick, and I was rooting for the Browns big time, of course. But like that was a cool game to watch. No, this is going to be like a slop fest where you go into you're going into the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter, and it's still a 1-score game, and you're going, oh my God, neither of these teams want to win.
I'm going to say I'll have some fun and throw a score out there. I'm going to say the Browns win. Fans might be surprised by this. I'm going to say they scored 20 points. I'll say 20-17 Browns win, and the defense has to score a touchdown if that's going to happen and if they're going to win the game, or at least set them up at like the 5-yard line or something like that.
Scoop and score, that's in the cards.
Yeah, that's got to be, I think, the way that this game goes down for the Browns to end up coming out victorious. Anyway, appreciate you guys jumping on in with us to preview this matchup. I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Locked On Browns, Locked On Vikings. Make them your first and second listen, whichever order you want to do them in this week. And always, we appreciate you guys coming to hang out. Enjoy the game on Sunday, and we will talk to you again real soon.